All right, this is the first ever episode of the Blaine Fowler Music Nerd Podcast. That's what I'm calling it, the Blaine Fowler Music Nerd Podcast, because deep down, I'm a music nerd. You listen to me on the radio, think, oh, he's just goofing around and all that stuff. No, I got into radio because I love music. And I was going to educate the world on what is good music and bad music, and then I learned that, oh, there's formats and crap, and it's a business, and you can't do that. So, anyway, this podcast is my passion. It's basically music. And my first guest for my first ever episode, a guy that I was actually in a band with. I believe at one point the name of our band was Century, and then it was Waitress Wanted. Our lead vocalist, guitarist, and a guy who is a recording artist in his own right, Jason Mapes. Jason!
Hey there!
Hey, this is probably the most Sault Ste. Marie and the most Van Halen moment I can think of from my high school years. So my senior year, the new Van Halen 5150 came out. And I remember all of us posing for a picture in the parking lot with empty cases of beer. And the song that was playing in the background while we took that picture was Why Can't This Be Love? The brand new Sammy Hagar's the lead singer, Van Halen song. And first off, that picture would never it made it into the yearbook, by the way. How does that happen? And I mean, that would never happen today, but that was such a Van Halen kind of moment because those guys, that's what this band was. They were the soundtrack to basically your entire high school, college experience.
Well, and just kind of a similar story for what you just said. My senior year was 1984.
Yeah.
So, of course, the album 1984, which came out, if I recall, I think they released the video on January 1st, of 1984.
Right.
And then the album came out the week later.
Yeah.
Or something very, very close to that.
Yeah.
The single, and then the album was out after that. And, of course, we're talking Jump, Panama, Drop Dead Legs, Hot for Teacher, and all that stuff. And that was the soundtrack of my senior year of high school.
Yeah.
And, wait a second. Hold on. Can you see that?
You got the shirt on. Tour of the World, Van Halen, 1984.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I'm seeing a Wolfgang guitar in the background.
That's one of two that I own. I actually own two. That is one of two. That is my, they're equal guitars except there's...
Spoken like a true guitarist.
Well, they're the exact same model, but I will tell you, I have a blue and I have a purple, and they're both identical as far as model year, everything, but the purple one plays better. Yeah. It was also my first one, and so it sits in storage more. This one, since I don't mind having easy access to this one's kind of hanging on the wall. This is my recording studio.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I figured.
So when I need a
You're
guitar,
in mine.
And I've got I've got my bass up there and stuff, but I have a whole bunch of other guitars that I don't leave out. They're actually locked up and they're in their cases and with a one of those little air conditioner things.
Oh wow, you're that guy. Oh okay. Wow.
Take care of them, so.
You really nerded up. You know what? It's appropriate that you're on the Music Nerd Podcast. All right, let's talk about. There's so many things. I don't know about you, but I've been in a Eddie Van Halen, in a good way, fog for the last 2 weeks. I feel like, Jason, this is like if one of our best friends from high school had passed away.
Well, I don't think you're definitely not alone with that. I pulled out all the Van Halen DVDs that I have, and I think we all went into that because this guy changed the world. It wasn't like this was just, they were a great band. To explain what this guy did, I was talking to somebody that I know that's much younger, was like, but doesn't all guitarists pretty much, are they kind of the same?
No.
Well, I mean, and since Eddie, there was a whole era of time where everybody was trying to sound so much like Eddie that, yes, there were some copycats. Because, I mean, Eddie used to joke that it was very much like a guy would drive up to you in the car he stole and then go, hey, man, like my new car?
Exactly, yeah.
And so, yeah, he did, he changed everything so much that a lot of people did try to sound like him. But I explained it like this. I said, just picture if all rap music sounded like DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, and then all of a sudden Eminem came along.
Exactly.
Because, yeah, there's been rap music around for years and years and years, but all of a sudden when somebody hit the scene that changed how everybody did their stuff, and he was he was to me the equivalent of that, because I think after Eminem came on the scene, rap music completely changed.
Absolutely, yes.
I would say that's probably the closest comparison I could make for people that would not be maybe rock fans or especially understand the whole scope of what was happening in the 70s until Eddie hit. And then everything that came after was because of Van Halen.
Mm-hmm. You're 100% right. Think of all those bands from L.A. that got signed in the 80s. They were all basically, in one way or another, they were a relation to or a distant cousin of the Van Halen family tree. You may have had the singer who was totally copying Dave's moves. You had the guitar player. I mean, White Lion is the first band I can think of. The guitar player was totally trying to be Eddie. He looked a little bit like Eddie. The lead singer, a great singer, Mike Tramp, right? I think looked a lot like Dave, kind of even had a little bit of a howl to his voice. I mean, we could list a number of bands that were descendants of, good or bad, by the way, Van Halen. If not for Van Halen, we don't have the music that we had growing up.
Exactly. Well, they were so much into them that my understanding was that they actually had nicknames that they used to call him David Lee Tramp and Vito Van Halen.
Yes, I believe that.
Were called amongst their peers when they were still doing the clubs and stuff, because they were so much emulating what happened there. But Vince Neil, totally
David Lee Roth
from David Lee Roth. And
quick argument: who's a worse singer now, Vince Neil or David Lee Roth?
Vince is worse. Vince is worse because, granted, I think Dave has his good nights and bad nights.
Yeah.
Most of the time with Dave, now I saw the last time that I was able to see them was when they were touring with Kool and the Gang opening.
Yeah, I saw that one too.
Okay. Now, the show that they played here in Nashville wasn't horrible.
No.
Now Dave basically could not do what he used to do when he was a kid, and not many of us can anyway.
Right.
And what he was kind of doing as a singer was he was kind of doing this thing where in order to hit the notes, he was kind of singing them like this.
Yes.
Oh yeah, Phantom Bob, like that.
That's it.
The biggest problem with Dave, as much as he's still doing a lot of the same stuff that he used to do when he was younger, some of that stuff he really needed to drop because it got to the point that it became
kitschy.
Yeah, too kitschy, and it was too much. It became a parody of a joke kind of thing, and it was like he not only were the times different, but like even like his act was a little misogynistic.
Yeah, very
much. But he also had a little bit of a foghorn leghorn thing. It was like
exactly
very much talking to you, boy.
That's exactly it. No, Jason, it's funny because I was watching a video of them on the Ellen Show from a few years ago, around the 2015 tour, and they're doing Dance the Night Away, and he insists on dancing with this production assistant on the show. And you can tell she's not comfortable. I'm like, Dave, it's 2015, brother. You got to turn this off. You can't do this now. You can't just grab a girl and pull her up in front of on a national TV show and embarrass her. Yeah. And you can't just grab her and treat her like a possession. Now, in 1983, that was, right there with everything else that you were doing.
Well, think of the videos too, like Hot for Teacher.
Oh yeah,
you could not do that in today's world.
No. And it also looks weird when you're 60 and you're doing that.
But I always thought that David Lee Roth, his interviews sounded like Charlie Manson talking about music.
Yes. That's very true.
Go on to YouTube, dial up some old Charlie Manson interview, and then watch a David Lee Roth one right after that, and you'll see that they're really just kind of, it's kind of about the feelings that you get and stuff like that. And you get Charlie Manson going, hey, I'll tell you, it's just about the feelings I had. And and just one's a little more crazy than the other.
Correct.
But very, very manic. And his approach to the band, if he had actually just said, you know what, I'm going to do what I do, but I'm going to hone it down to where I do just enough to do it well,
right,
and not try to take it over the top, because every time he tries to take it over the top, it just becomes
off the road.
It's bad Vegas.
Yeah, you nailed it. Now here's the funny thing, and I know we're kind of getting off on a tangent about Dave right now, but I saw videos of Dave opening for Kiss on the End of the Road tour, and it seemed like he had it a little more under control. He was singing the melodies, for example, as opposed to just making stuff up on the fly like he was doing on the last Van Halen tour.
I have a theory, though, that I think he was using more backing tracks and he could not stray from.
Yes, he's not the only one on that tour using a few backing tracks.
Yeah.
But we digress.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm talking with Jason Mapes. Jason and I were in a band together back in high school. Jason has a recording career of his own. He lives in the Nashville area. And we're just talking about how much Eddie and Van Halen, I mean, really, they're kind of synonymous with each other, how much influence they had on our lives. Jason, do you remember like hearing that first Van Halen song? And was it Eruption? Or what was it? What was the song that just like...
I think the first one that I heard, my memory's a little foggy in which one was exactly the first one, but my inclination was that it was You Really Got Me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the first thing that I heard. And I don't think I heard Eruption when I heard that song. I don't think the radio station played.
Not in the Sioux.
Eruption. They just played
right.
You Really Got Me.
Yeah.
And I remember having the cassette. And as a matter of fact, I was talking about this with a mutual friend of ours, Rob Johnson.
Oh, sweet.
Rob and I were the two guys who skipped class, and we were either walking to the nearest grocery store to get a couple of Mountain Dews or whatever, but we had
Marion's
the Sanyo boombox.
Yep.
And I remember that we had Van Halen cassettes, and I remember listening to Eruption way too loud for the neighbors, walking around with this thing, and we'd be just kicking back with this. And I always tell people that, the era that I grew up, it was Paul Stanley and Ace Frehley that made me want to be, a performer,
mm-hmm.
made me want to play guitar, but it was Eddie that made me want to be a guitarist.
Yes.
And I think that there's a big difference there. It's like performing with the instrument was one thing. All of a sudden going, I want to know not only what I'm doing, but I want to take that to a higher level, which of course none of us could ever reach that Eddie level of playing. No. But it certainly just made me fall in love with the instrument as itself without anything else, and without performing in mind, without thinking about singing in mind or any of that stuff.
Right.
Because I've always been a little bit of a singing guitar player.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. In our band, that was you were the lead singer.
Yeah, and I've always been a singing guitar player, but Eddie made me want to learn how to play more.
Yeah. And I started guitar much later than you. I started off as a drummer. So when I picked up guitar, Eddie was, it's funny, I'm a big Zeppelin guy, big Rush guy, but you can't just learn an instrument and start at Rush or start at Zeppelin. Yeah. It's a little, the learning curve's a little high on that. So you kind of have to work your way up. But then, of course, Van Halen, and I'm watching, and we had a guy in our band, Gary, who could do that stuff really well, the finger tapping and all that kind of stuff. But it's more than just imitating what he was doing. I've always said you can buy every Eddie Van Halen product known to man. You could get all the pedals, you can get all the amps, you can get the latest model of the guitar, but you don't have his hands, so it's not going to sound the same.
Exactly.
And I think that's true for a lot of the great guitar players. If you think of somebody, here's somebody that's kind of in the neutral zone, I suppose. David Gilmour from Pink Floyd. That guy sounds like David Gilmour. Doesn't matter what effects pedals he's using. Doesn't matter what model of guitar he's using. Jimmy Page still sounds like Jimmy Page. Joe Satriani, he's got a lot of toys and stuff, but ultimately it's Joe Satriani. And Eddie Van Halen, to me, at least for guys our age, Eddie was the guy who kind of solidified that. I'm going to plug in, turn it up really loud, maybe add like a phaser or something like that, but that was about it. There was nothing special, and there wasn't any special editing going on because you couldn't do that.
The one that I always think about, too, is another guitar player, not near as well known, but Eric Johnson.
Yeah.
I saw a video, and you can probably find this on YouTube, but he's playing on Zakk Wylde's rack. But he doesn't sound like Zakk Wylde. It sounds like Eric Johnson playing the guitar. It's a little more distorted because Zakk has everything's cranked up to the point of just crackling. Right. But it still sounded like Eric Johnson, which just lets you know that most of it is here and in the picking hand, how they're connecting and stuff like that. And so that's what it's really all about. Now, somebody could sit there and labor, not to discourage anybody, because somebody could sit there and labor about how they're doing the approach and maybe eventually make that connection where they sound somewhat like that other guitar player, or maybe they're just lucky that they have a similar approach and that maybe some of the tones sound the same.
Yeah.
But no matter how much you tried, you still will never be exact. You might get some nuances and stuff, but you're never going to find that thing where you go, oh, that's identical.
Somebody was saying, I can't remember where I read this, but they said, you know what, we're never going to have this again because technology has advanced so far now that no one's ever going to want to build their own guitar and come up with their own kind of stuff and all that. And I was like, you know what, there's probably some truth to that. And he was never taught properly how to play guitar.
Yeah.
He was self-taught.
Well, he was a piano player. He was a piano player that was also a beginning drummer. He picked up the guitar and it just kind of became one of those things where it was so natural that he just ran with it.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like, I don't think it was ever something he even thought about. It was actually just something that happened on a lark. If I remember the interview I heard with him where he just, you know, it was never his intent, but he picked it up and it worked so well that it was like, oh, you got to keep doing it.
Jason, of all the things, I'm putting you on the spot, but what is, like, if you could say one thing to Eddie, what would you have said?
Actually, I met Eddie, so I actually did get a chance to talk to Eddie.
What did you say to Eddie when you met him?
I told him, I said I couldn't tell you in the few moments that I have with you what you're meant to me over the years.
Yeah.
You know, I sat there and thought about what I was going to say, and I didn't want to be one of those guys that were going, "Oh man, you know, you're this and that." And you're... But at that point, you know, you're like, "But what else are you going to say?" Because that's the reality of it and stuff. And I just basically said I could never summarize in the few moments that I have what you meant to me. You know, and I was there also with another mutual friend of ours, Rich Blair.
Oh, wow!
There. And so I knew I was only going to have a few moments. Then I wanted Rich to be able to say hi to him. And I went over and I talked to Alex and Michael. And this is when they were touring with Gary Sharon.
Okay.
I visited with those guys really quick. We snapped a picture and then went on our way. But I did get a chance to actually talk to him. I suppose if I was actually going to really get time to talk with him, like if he was going to walk into my studio someday because he needed to borrow something.
Can I borrow your EVH guitar, please? Mine doesn't seem to be working properly.
Yeah, can I borrow? I heard you have two of them.
Yes. Can I have the purple one? I heard that's the better one.
Here, it plays better than the other. I suppose if I had that kind of time, I would probably just more emphasize about the you know, people talk about, you know, his innovation and all that stuff, but there's an inspiration factor that's really hard to talk about. That it's like I said, it just, you know, you made me want to learn more about the instrument.
Yeah.
Like, how did you figure out how to do that stuff from just, you know, like when he talked about how he came up with his style of tapping. Yes, there were people that tapped on the guitar before him, but he didn't know about it because there was never any YouTube back then. It wasn't like he could ever learn about it. And he basically just saw Jimmy Page doing
Heartbreaker,
you know, single hammer offs and stuff like that. Well, then he thought, well, hey, what if I do this?
Right.
You know, then that became this. And
right.
So, but I mean, as far as inspiration, listen to him play piano. The guy plays piano better than most piano players.
Yeah.
And the construction of his songs, like a song like Right Now, so far ahead of what any other band that wanted to be Van Halen could do.
Right. And at the same time, incredibly melodic, very accessible, hooks all over the place. I think that's the thing. You know, I don't know what I would say to Eddie. I would probably say, you know, like you, I've had the chance to meet some artists that I really love. I met Geddy and Alex from Rush, and all I said was thank you for the music.
Yeah.
Because there's no way in the time that you're allowed, which is like 20 seconds, just literally a grip and grin and you're out.
Yeah.
I just said, thank you so much for the music. I think that's what I would say to Eddie. But I think the thing that I keep thinking about as I'm diving deeper into this Van Halen rabbit hole these last few days is, you know what? He was such a good guitar player, such an innovative guy when it came to the equipment and how he played. We're forgetting something. He was also an incredibly good songwriter.
Yeah.
Those songs all had tons of hooks, great riffs, great licks. Every Van Halen song, and let me see if you catch on to what I'm talking about. It seems to me like almost every Van Halen song has a bridge or a part where it feels like the band is falling down a set of stairs only to land perfectly in a great chorus or a great verse.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's like, obviously they had to stay within the laws that own music. There's certain musical laws that people could talk about breaking the laws, but some of them, if you break, you actually just end up sounding shitty.
Right. And we don't want that.
Stucky. I'm not sure for any, but
no, I'll leave it.
But, obviously you still have to fall within certain parameters that you have to in order to just be musical.
Right.
There is mathematics involved with that. But at the same time, you could take a song like Right Now where all of a sudden it goes before the solo where it has that dong, 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 and then it goes back into where the solo part is, and they've changed tempo, they've dropped the key and done all of that, and they always had little moments like that. There's probably a few songs where they didn't do it every time.
Right.
Some of the songs were just straight ahead, 4 chords and a
right.
And
the song here's a great example though, the song 5150, and if you're listening to this podcast and you don't remember the song, it's on the album 5150, first album they did with Sammy, and the song 5150, especially really the live version is the best. But man, that thing, I mean, the intro's like a minute and a half.
Yeah.
But it takes you somewhere. It goes someplace. And I'm not sure if it's all in 4/4 or not. There are parts of it I'm like, is he tripping is he screwing with the space-time continuum here? What's going on? But that to me, his rhythm playing and his chords and just the songwriting, because he wrote all the riffs, the singers wrote the lyrics. He did an incredible job.
Yeah, it was very much like that. He would. I know they would hone the songs afterwards. Once they had some lyrics, they might make some changes and things like that. But he would present the cassette. Sass Jordan was actually somebody that they brought in to sing with them when they were writing songs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they don't have any tapes of it. She would just go there and she would sing while they would work on tunes. She has told some of these stories about how, they would give her cassettes of stuff, and a lot of them she'd go, not everything was usable.
Right.
She said there were things that you'd go, there's no way I can write anything over this, because it would just be Alex and Eddie noodling.
Right, yeah. Noodling.
So that they had to hone some of the stuff that they did to a point. And maybe after lyrics would come in, they would change things and go, oh, you know what? Because of that lyric, it's made me think of doing this now. And they might add something or change where a chorus was or things like that. There are, I think there's an interview where he talks about how he changed Beat It for Michael Jackson.
Yes.
Like they in there and he's like, there were things in the wrong spot. He said, no, we need to move the bridge here and we need to do this. And actually changed around the song. And Jackson actually thanked him for it. He said, you made my song better.
Yeah. And he made nothing on the song too. That's the amazing. He did it for free.
Did it for free. Was there for like 15 minutes.
Right. He wanted to work with Quincy Jones, and I think Michael wasn't even in the room when he recorded.
I think he came in when they were doing playback or something.
Okay. Yeah.
And came in when they were doing playback. He was, there. But there a lot of those interesting interviews. They're definitely worth jumping down the rabbit hole when you got some time.
Oh, it's so good. And if you do morning radio, you got afternoons wide open. So guess what I've been doing? Thank you very, very much, man. It's great to see you.
Yeah, you too.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care, Blaine.
All right. Hey, thanks for listening to my first ever Blaine Fowler Music Nerd podcast, remembering Eddie Van Halen, with my special guest, Jason Mapes. More with Jason coming up in a future podcast. He's worked with guys like Rudy Sarzo and Bruce Kulick of Kiss. We'll talk to him about that and what that was like. Plus, upcoming episodes, we're going to do a little yacht rock. We're going to get really nerdy on Rush and more. It's my first ever episode. Thanks for listening. It's the Music Nerd Podcast with me, Blaine Fowler.